Hey everybody, Tony D with a screenwriter's tip, or a screenwriting tip outside today. It's so nice. It's freaking hot, so I'm not going to be out here very long. Today, it's about sitcoms. I've been writing sitcoms recently for YouTube thing, mostly for fun, and it's been great. So I wanted to talk about the dynamics involved in writing a sitcom. Now, the sitcoms I'm writing are very short. They're only about... They're in 2 parts and they're 5 minutes each. So it's very tight. But I'm still trying to follow the sitcom format, which is basically you set up, sitcom is short for situational comedy. And the situation is often repeated again and again. The characters have to be very basic. Because you don't have a lot of time, even in a half hour, and you certainly don't have a lot of time in 5 minutes. So the characters, mostly you're just telling the same joke over and over again in different ways. So the example that would probably be closest to the one I'm doing right now would be 2.5 Men. Right? So you have, in 2.5 Men, you have Charlie, who's the guy who everything works out for. He's famous, he's rich. He's got all these gorgeous women around him. He's single. Everything good happens to Charlie for most of the run of the series. I'm talking, before Charlie Sheen had a falling out. Then you have John Cryer, his brother. He's the total opposite. He's the responsible one. He got married. He had a kid. He has a career, and everything went to hell after he got divorced. And now he has no money, and all he does is struggle. And everything bad happens to. His character's name is Alan. So everything bad happens to Alan. And then his son is just sort of the kid character that are in a lot of sitcoms. So everything you repeat in 3.5 Men is, no matter what happens, Alan always loses, Charlie always wins. And so what you do is you play with that dynamic, making it, setting up things that are more and more impossible for Charlie to win and more impossible for Alan to lose, yet it happens every single time because repetition is the staple of comedy. Let me say that again. Repetition is the staple of comedy. So again, you want to have very broad characters. You want to have very sort of basic things. Odd Couple was very similar in that way. Oscar was sloppy, Felix was neat, and then you play in that dynamic. No matter what it is, you try to get that dynamic in. Even if they were going to a fancy dinner party, it was mostly going to focus on Oscar. If they were going to, a mud wrestling tournament, it would focus mostly on Felix. And you would try to create those situations so the character dynamic would be obvious and on display. And you're going to tell a lot of one-liners. It's going to be very short and to the point. It's definitely not going to be Shakespeare, but you can try to have some fun with it, some messaging, but not a whole lot. Sitcoms are a drag when they start to have that very special episode where horrible things happen and then you bring reality into it. It's not a reality. Sitcoms are their own reality, and they're a fun reality just meant to entertain people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what you cut to. You cut to the chase. You always get to the entertaining part in a sitcom. Now, you want to have a three-act arc, just like in a movie. So the first act is going to be the reestablishment of the characters and the new situation. So in Three's Company, it was always that Jack Tripper was rooming with 2 beautiful women, and he had to pretend to be gay in order to allow his weirdo landlord to room with these 2 beautiful women. It was okay since the landlord was under the impression he was gay. So what would always happen is in the first act, you'd reestablish that, and then in the second act, or by the end of the first act, something would happen that would be a little different. Like Jack would have a date with a really hot girl, and he'd want to bring her to the apartment for some reason, and he needed to enlist the aid of his 2 roommates in order to distract the landlord long enough so he could have the date and not reveal that to his girlfriend that he's lying to his landlord, or that his landlord that he's lying to him. And then, of course, you know, the worst possible thing happens. For whatever reason, the landlord ends up there on the date, and Jack has to lie and pretend he's gay, and then lie to the woman, and then usually by the end of the episode he'd be exposed, usually by the woman as opposed to the landlord, because the landlord's going to be back in another episode. And then, you know, he would have to pay, in that he wouldn't get sex, or that, you know, the girl breaks up with him or dumps a drink on his face, or, you know, or it could be the ironic twist, which is sort of like meta. He manages to explain it to her, and not only is she okay with that, she reveals that she's been lying too, and that she has an even bigger lie. That Jack really is like, whoa, that's too much. So, you don't have a lot of time in these things, right? You don't have a lot of wind up. You just got to get to, you know, it's a lot like the difference between writing a full-length comic book and writing a comic strip. You know, with the comic book, you've got some leeway. You can establish characters. You can have a couple of scenes where they talk. You can't do that in a comic strip. You just got to get to the joke. It's set up, reaction, punchline, 3 panels, 1, 2, 3. So when you're writing a sitcom, it's very similar to that. You're setting everything up in the first act, you're doing the reactions in the second act, and you do the big payoff in the third act, and then you're out. So don't waste a lot of time. You're going to have a lot of editing in a sitcom. So one of the ways I write things is I will write them, and then I'll go back and fix them for length, right? So currently I'm writing novellas, and I'm going the other way with it. Usually they have to be 80 pages. I finish at 60 pages, and then I have to go back and add in description. With a sitcom, I do the opposite, right? I might write the thing, if it's, you know, in this case, mine are 5 minutes long, so they got to be about 5 pages. So if I get to 7 pages, then I go back and see where I could trim the fat, get to 5.5, 6, because I got a little bit of leeway. And, you know, it depends on what happens in the episode, but I'm going to try to get that in at around 5.5, 6 pages tops. Maybe 7 if there's just no other way to do it. But, you know, for a regular sitcom, you want 22 pages, of course, because they're really 22 minutes. And it's important to put the commercial breaks in, and the commercial breaks are going to be end of the first act, end of the second act. And then possibly you could have end of the third act. When you come back from that commercial break, you might have 30 seconds to do a quick thing before the credits, and then the credits take up part of that time, and you have to factor in to that when you're writing the sitcom. And also too, you have to keep it a little loose so the actors and the people making the sitcom can have a little leeway in the cut or extend something, because it's all about timing. I mean, it has to be 22, I forget the exact time, I want to say like 22:10 or 22 exactly, because they have to get those commercials in there. That's the way TV works. Now with a sitcom on YouTube, you can do whatever you want, doesn't really matter. And you know, when you look at The Simpsons, which is formatted like a sitcom, they even had bits that they specifically designed to cut out in syndication or ad. So they would have 30-second bits, because they knew that the people syndicating it could cut that much out and then put that in, jam in another commercial. That's why sometimes too, you know, the credits will either be truncated on the side, or they'll be sped up, because maybe they're jamming in another 15-second commercial, and they could just do that if they speed up the credits. It's all about that in a sitcom and in television, all about like jamming in as much commercials as possible. Not that you need to worry about that creatively, but it's something to consider, because again, screenwriting is all about formatting. and you want to understand the format so you can play around within that format. And because, you know, if you hand it a sitcom and it's 47 pages long and it's not an hour show, you're in trouble. So that's it for screenwriting tips, and we'll see you next time.